Okay, so I just wanted to show you how you can go a bit further with the massing, particularly once you have started on the layout for the car park. Then that should give you a firmer idea of the overall maximum footprint of the building, I suppose. And so there, I've started to work out the outside shell in a more detailed way, and that's actually given me a good starting point to get the overall volumes that I want for the different levels. And so you can of course start to shape that geometry as well, but I'm really just using I will actually use this as part of the building form as well, but I'm really using it to just to get an overall idea of that the bulk of the building. And so one thing I've done there that I didn't show you before is that I've made sure that the top and the bottom of those blocks, essentially I've got one block for the ground floor and then another block for all of the teaching and staff rooms and other things that are all part of that one group. And so the top and the bottom of those I've tied to the levels. And so there, you just need to make sure, if you're going to try that you don't accidentally get the edge. So it's possible to select just the edge. Now it probably won't do it for me because I've locked my top, so I might unlock that and just show you. No, it's going to get the surface again. Well, let's just try. So if I stretch that down, yeah, not doing the whole thing. But you'll see definitely sometimes it will just get the edge. And maybe if I go into a 3D view, it'll be easy to show you that. There we are. So that's just the edge there. And so it's easy to select that by mistake and accidentally lock just one side. So again, no, it's because I'm in a section, that's why it wasn't doing it for me. So back into the plan view there, so I should have really been in the west elevation to show you that. So here now, if I click, there we go. So that's, you can see there, selecting the edge. And if I was to lock that to the level, then obviously if I change the level, it's going to slope the building, which you probably don't want. So again, using tab there, I can make sure it's selecting the surface. Now, it's really important when you're working with things like massing that you keep an eye on what you're selecting and use tab when necessary to get the part you need. And it tells you there if you hover long enough, but also keep an eye on the status bar down the bottom left corner if you're not used to doing that. That's really important. So again, pressing tab, you can see there now it looks the same, but it's telling me in the bottom left corner it's form element surface. And now to relock that to the roof level, the trick is to just drag it away and then drag it back, and that'll give you the lock symbol. Okay, so then I've done the same with the bottom. Finish mass. And now, if I go and change any of these values for my level heights, it'll go with them. Right, so then what you can do with the interior planning, as you start to work that out a little bit more, and then maybe just try and get an idea of the elements that you require and just lay them out in block form. Don't try and do all of that with one mass family, and that's where massing can cause some problems. So here I've got a mass family which is really just the envelope of the building I want. Notice how the floor plates have gone with the level changes that I made. And so then now, if I go back to one of my car park levels, I'm going to make a new mass, massing in sight, in place mass, and this will be my functions within the levels. Some of these may stretch across multiple levels, but they'll be inside those volumes. And so my core may be here. I'm probably going to adjust that, but that could be a good starting point. So using the rectangle tool, I can just trace over my grids, and probably not a bad idea to lock those for the time being in case my grids move. And then I can select those lines, and of course the same as I did with all the other masses previously, just use create form, make a solid form, and then adjust the height as necessary. So actually that goes through to the top. So that would be my core, and actually I can see straight away that I've done the ground floor setback on the same line, so right away I can say, well, that volume planning doesn't work. So if I go back to here now, to adjust that, same idea, I've got to make sure I'm getting the front surface, unlock it, and maybe I'll bring it back to here, lock it again, and then this might come back to wherever my next grid line goes, which I'll work out later. And so then going to the upper levels, so let's put the drawings away. Okay, so the kitchenette is one thing I know you'll need on that level, and again simply just a rectangle to plan that out, just roughly, and of course create form, so I'm sure you get the idea there. So the important point there is that because these are a separate mass family, I don't need to worry about them interfering with the overall forms I did earlier. And so again I can see there, okay, it may have worked on the basement level but not here, so easy to just adjust that. And that's the great thing about massing. Once you put walls and other things in, much harder to adjust those, and also just to visualise in 3D. So the other major thing though that massing is great for is modelling those complex components that are just impossible with the regular modelling tools or regular drawing tools that you have. So I want to make basically a complex curtain wall system, and you'll see that that curtain system tool is really designed to be used for or with operations like this. It doesn't really work on its own, but once you've created geometry that has the surface you want the curtain system to follow, then you can just pick that to create your system. So I'm going to go into my north elevation, and again make a new mass family using in-place mass, and so this will be sunshade. And so then I'm going to again draw a shape using the line tool, but this time it's going to ask me to pick a plane because I'm drawing perpendicular to the ground. And so it's important that you can draw in elevation, and here I could choose one of the planes that I've defined already. Often that's a really sensible thing to do, using a reference plane or a grid, but I can actually use the pick plane option here and it should work pretty well. So I'm going to click OK, and then hovering over the surface that I've done there using the massing previously, I can pick the front of that envelope. So make sure I'm not getting the top, I'm trying to get the front there. And now I'm just going to draw the shape I want, fairly roughly. I'm going to come back and probably adjust it later, but for now, just to get the basic idea, something like this is what I'm after. Now it's going out, and I'm just going to disable cropping temporarily so that I can see above that. So I want something that's going to rise up above the things I have on the roof level. Slope back down on the other side and kind of wrap around the building. So you'll see lots of firms do this sort of form, and DCM have done something pretty similar just recently, but lots of other firms have done this sort of thing before as well. So again, just trying to wrap under the building a little bit there. There we go. So looking at it now, I might think, well, I want a little bit more space here in case I need to put a balustrade on the roof there. So check that distance, and you can see that's not quite enough. So you can always select the shape and then click on that individual segment and use the arrow keys just to nudge that up. So I just want to make sure I've got a meter. There we go, that's fine. And I don't need people to be able to walk under it all the way, as long as they can go under part of it. And then again over here, making sure I've got a meter. Okay, so you can see there, oops, I better check that, so I'm just going to undo that. So I didn't look at the whole shape. So what I should have checked when I selected it, you can see it didn't select this line, but it selected the others, and that's an important thing to think about again when you're using this drawing tool with the massing options. That's one shape, this is another one. So I'll show you how you can join those in a second, but for now, I'm going to get the one I want to adjust, click on it again to make sure I'm only moving that, move it up a bit, and then again check my distance. So there we go, that's enough room. And now I'm going to try using trim to corner to join those two things together, which with any luck will make it into one shape, but no, it hasn't. Okay, so you can try using the join tool. No, so let's have a look in 3D. It's a bit painful sometimes if they're in different planes, but here, no, they're in the same plane. Yeah, so you can see there they're not connecting. Right, so what I might do is just draw a new shape over the top. So it's really important that they are one connected shape. So back to wireframe, just go to pick lines, and then pick each of those, or actually alternatively just draw with the line tool. Might be better here actually. Also, you can see there it's trying to pick a new face. I'm just going to make sure I don't do that. So to force it there to snap to the end of that line, I'm going to type SE, snap to endpoint, and then just trace around, and it should stick to the plane that I've drawn in. Unfortunately, the 3D drawing operations you have in Revit are nowhere near what you'll get in a true 3D program like 3ds Max. Here we go, it's telling me the lines overlap. That shouldn't be a problem. So there we go. So you can see there I've got a connected shape on top, but I've got to go now and make sure I get rid of the duplicates. Okay, so an easy way of doing that is just to select the whole thing with a window, hold down Shift, and then see if I can select on top of each of those segments, which should remove the last thing I've drawn. So I should have there 6 selected. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Delete, and now, it just didn't do the last one. It's a bit annoying. Okay, so then, that's really frustrating. So I'll go back and draw that again. Back into the north elevation, and again with the line tool. This time, if I snap to the end of that, SE, and then try drawing underneath, with any luck it will join them. Doesn't want to do it. Really painful when this happens. But actually what I'll do, if I create a form, with any luck it'll do it as one anyway. So anyway, sometimes it is worth really playing with that to get it to be one shape, but I'm not going to worry for now, just to get this done. Bring this one back up. Okay, so again with Control I can select both of them anyway, and then use Create Form to extrude that. So again with massing you don't need a closed shape to do an extrusion. And then actually I'm going to move the whole thing back in the site view. So let's make a window around that, and then using the move tool, move it back so that it lines up with the front of the building. Back to my 3D view, then I should be able to get the inside edge there. Again, this can be a bit fiddly, but using Control there, I can select all of those inner edges. Just make sure, yep, they're the right ones. So again, if you find yourself doing a lot of this sort of work, I'd highly recommend learning Maya or 3ds Max. But it does work in Revit, so there we go. Oh, I've got a bit too far there. Get that back up a bit. Alright, so then into my 3D view again. So you can see I've stretched that basically the length of the building. I'm going to probably make the building a bit shorter anyway, so I don't want to go all the way to the end. Ah, but I missed a point. Not a problem. You can just select that vertex and stretch it by itself and it should snap to line up with the back. Maybe I missed the other side too. Yep, I did. Again, that will easily snap to line up with the back. So I've got the basic shell that I want, but now I want to cut that up to make it a more interesting form. So going to the west elevation, I'm going to draw another shape. Again, it'll ask me to pick a plane, so that's fine. I'm going to choose the side of the building that I can see there. Oh, sorry, I'll get it over here to make sure it's the flat surface. And then I'm going to just try and get a slope that should work well there. There we go. So again, looking at that in 3D, you can see the shape I've made. Again, to adjust that, I can easily just bring down one of those segments, and this one at the top needs to come up higher. There we go, that's easily high enough. And so now I'll select that shape. Again, I want this to be a void, but I'm going to make it a solid first, and that's a real trick when you're doing any sort of modelling in Revit. It's much easier to adjust something when it's a solid. So by making it a solid first, and then getting it to be what I want, I can then change it to a void afterwards. So here I want this to slope. So remember we've got the sun rising over here, setting over here, and so I want the morning sun to have more access than the afternoon sun. So I'm going to bring this back just by dragging that edge, something like that. And now I can select that whole element, again just using tab until it tells me I've got the element, and in properties I can change that to a void, and it'll cut away at an angle. Now I might think, well actually I don't mind the way it's cutting, but I want that to be further forward, so I'm going to undo that and just bring this edge that way, and maybe then bring the whole shape forward a little bit as well. Oh no, sorry, that's about as far as I can go. That's fine. Okay, so again, change that to a void, and it should cut automatically. Sometimes if it doesn't, then you can use the cut tool to force it. And actually now I'm looking at that, I do want to move it forward. So I'll do that without going back to making it a solid again, just to show you how it can be tricky to select the void now that I've done the cut, but it's still there. So to select it, what you can do is just make a window around everything, and then you should see it, and you can then select the void on its own. Back into the site view, and now it's still selected, and I can nudge that using the arrows on the keyboard, or even in the 3D view. So it's still not quite what I want, so I'm going to just keep adjusting that. Getting there, do it just a little bit more. But again, imagine how much more difficult this would be if I'd made walls out of everything. Anyway, so that's the sort of thing I was after. Yep, getting there. Okay, so now I want to do some more cuts into that, and so using, well, a few little options you have. For the back, I want to get that void again, so again, just selecting that. Now I can copy it in plan. So as you can see though, because it's a void, it's much harder to work with than if it was a solid. Once you've turned it into a void though, it's hard to go back to make it a solid again. So what I'll have to do then is rotate this while it's a void, which is easy or easier because I've got that centre line there. So I'm going to rotate it 180, and that's going to give me the cut at the back, which I'm going to adjust. So again, I can just move that void now. Again, selecting the window might be all I can do there. There we go, moving that back, something like that. And now I want to adjust the actual void form. So using that same option, selecting with the window again to get everything, then I can get the void. And sometimes the X-ray option will help you there. And then you can see the different parts. So I can use tab to get the edge there and then stretch that void. It's a bit more interactive as well. So yeah, getting there. I probably want to refine that a bit more. And yep, so I want to bring this bottom edge in. So lots of things you can play with there. Don't want to spend too long on this, but just a basic idea. That's it. There we go. Alright, so now I want to cut some slices out of this. So back into the elevation, I can just keep doing the same thing, but with different shapes. So again, just using the shape tool. There, the plane's already defined, so I'm just going to make sure I can avoid clicking onto any of these surfaces as I draw my new pieces. So something like this. There, just make sure I snap to the endpoint to close that. And then in the elevation again, might even go to wireframe just so you can see this and disable cropping so you can see the shape. And you can just copy that a few times. There we go. Okay, so now I can extrude those. Just using create form. Stretch it and then again change the angle if I want that to be something different. All while it's still a solid. Something like that. And just keep going the same way with all the others. So if you remember, red for X, green for Y, blue for Z, make your life a lot easier. And if you do start to use 3ds Max and Maya, they have the same icons, the same transform tool with the same colours and everything. Okay, so there we are. Actually, I want to slope that before I cut, so I'll just drag this across. There we go. So just making sure they intersect properly, and then using the cut tool. Sorry, not the cut tool, so just changing these into voids. Don't even need to use cut. So I can use tab to select the element, and then control to add that to the selection and change them to voids as a group. And there we are. So I can turn that into a curtain wall that'll wrap around the building really easily. But before doing that, I'd probably get the main core of the building modelled, and I know that I can put a mesh system around that using curtain systems. So that's a really common approach with Revit. And again, you don't have to do massing to create walls and floors and roofs and ceilings and all the other main elements that are going to define your building shape. But if you have to create all those other things just to work out the form, it is usually much harder and it's a lot more work, particularly when you're making adjustments, instead of just doing it with something simple like massing. Or can be simple anyway, with massing, and then we can have a look at how that fits into context before committing to making walls and all the other things. So you can see there I've got some maybe issues with privacy, but my screen hopefully will resolve a lot of those issues as well, and I can start to think about solar access and all those other things. So hopefully that'll give you some ideas.